Greetings. Last summer, I put up a video titled TEOTW Misrepresents Razib Khan. And then a few months after that, in November, I put up another video titled TEOTW Misrepresents Eran ElHaik. And now it seems it might be an auspicious time to add a third video to that series titled TEOTW Misrepresents Tudor Parfitt. And what inspired this third installment in this veritable series is the following YouTube community post, which TEOTW Ministries put up a little over a week ago, and which opens with the following declaration, quote, Tudor Parfitt says that black Jews are Jews by religion, but not by race, end quote. Now, that's a rather interesting claim, and in fact, I'd say it's an accusation, and it's an interesting accusation. And the twins base that accusation on the following video, which is hosted on the Emery Kennedy account, which itself was mirroring a video which the Institute for Sefardi and Anousim studies put up back in May of 2017. And I'll share links to all of these sources in the video description. But for now, I want to state that after watching the relevant video, I was left wondering how closely the TEOTW twins listened to that video, because it didn't seem like they accurately represented the very video that they're feigning outrage over, right? In fact, it seems clear to me that they misrepresented it. Now, in an attempt to illustrate just how different that video is from the way the twins depicted it, I'm going to play a couple of portions, and then I'm going to discuss what Dr. Parfitt actually says. So let's jump right in and pick this up from the beginning, and fair use.
So, you get to a certain point in your historical research when it comes to weird and woolly claims in the middle of Africa of Jewish origins, and you can't take it any further. And this happened to me in about 1997, and it was about at that point that I turned to genetics to see if genetics could help what otherwise was an intractable historical problem. There simply wasn't a window into the past to answer the question, are these people really of Jewish origin as they claim to be? And in the case, for instance, of the Lemba people of Central and Southern Africa, the use of DNA was remarkably successful and provided this window into the past, which suggested that they did indeed have a Jewish origin.
Okay, did you hear that? In contrast to how the TEOTW twins depicted Dr. Parfitt's position in this video, Dr. Parfitt himself made it pretty clear that he feels that the genetic evidence supports the Lemba having a legitimate claim to Jewish lineage. Now, of course, as a disclaimer, we should say that just because Parfitt recognizes the Lemba's claim as having a decent probability in its favor, that doesn't mean he feels the same way about every other group that makes similar claims. In fact, let me just close out the clip, play a little bit more of this clip, and then I'll summarize it.
And I used the same kind of technique among other groups, for instance, the B'nai Israel in India and various other groups throughout the world. And while I was doing this, I was very aware of the fact that side by side with these groups who've got plausible Jewish antecedents, origins, histories, there were also lots of groups in the world who were claiming to be Jewish, wanting to be Jewish, behaving as if they were Jewish, and who probably weren't.
So, just to be clear, Parfitt's position is that there are people in various places in Africa, in Asia, who claim to have Jewish origins, and there are differing levels of plausibility and differing levels of evidence in favor of those different positions, right? And once you understand that, that's rather different from how the TEOTW twins depicted Parfitt's position, which was along the lines of, if you're quote-unquote black, then you can only be a Jew religiously, not via ancestry. In short, it was a gross misrepresentation of his position on the part of the TEOTW twins. But now this raises a question, and that question is, where did the TEOTW twins get the idea that Parfitt was saying that such Jews were merely Jews by religion and not by quote-unquote race? Well, for that, we need to fast forward to the last 2.5 minutes of the video. And before I play that portion, permit me to give some background, right? You see, in the lead up to this point, Parfitt spent several minutes alluding to the likelihood that the Jews of Loango descended from Iberian Jews who were exiled to Sao Tome during the time of the Inquisition. So in this clip, you're going to hear Parfitt make a passing reference to a tragic story which starts with a violent act against Jewish orphans. And when he says that, he's referring to orphans from Iberian Jewish families who were sent to Sao Tome during the time of the Inquisition. So keep that background information in mind as you listen to this. All right, here's the clip.
Was observed on the basis of craniometry and various other things that were practiced at the time, that Jews tended to look exactly like the people among whom they lived. So it's ironic that in Germany, knowing what was to happen subsequently, German scientists, German anthropologists had decided that there was no such thing as a Jewish race. And one of the proofs of the fact that there was no such thing as a Jewish race were the black Jews of Loango, who was consistently described by about 1900 as being black and practices of a Jewish religion, but not racially Jewish. I think I'm overrunning. So it was a most unexpected story. It's a fascinating story, and in a way, it's a tragic story. It starts off with a violent act against Jewish orphans, and it finishes up, bizarrely, weirdly, in 1943, German soldiers are being sent east to slaughter Jews. But they couldn't be sent east to slaughter Jews without being given some kind of information about Jews. So a book was produced by some of the Judaic scholars that the Nazis exploited, used, created. And the book was called The Jew as World Parasite. And in this book, The Jew as World Parasite, here again, we have a little description of the black Jews of Loango. And so these Nazi soldiers were told, in the event that you go to Poland or Latvia, and you come across any black Jews of Loango, you don't have to kill them, because they're Jews by religion, but they're not Jews by race. Thank you very much.
Now, if I can summarize Parfitt's actual position, it would be that the Loango Jews were likely descended from Iberian Jews who were exiled to Sao Tome. That part about, them being Jews by religion and not by quote-unquote race was not Parfitt's position. Rather, he was quoting certain German thinkers from the 19th and 20th centuries. But he clearly was not endorsing that position. Or, at the very least, he wasn't denying that they themselves had Jewish origins, much less that anyone who's quote-unquote black can't have Jewish origins. Now, at this point, I realize some might wonder why one should even bother with trying to correct the Teo twins on the actual nuances of that lecture, that they misrepresented. And with that in mind, I would share that what inspired me personally to make this short video was the following comment on the twins community post. A woman writing under the screen name 78vet commented as follows, quote, "But wait, on multiple occasions, didn't he test the Lemba back in the 90s? He knows the truth," end quote. The unfortunate reality is that the Teo twins' misleading community post has this woman sincerely believing that Parfitt contradicted his earlier position on Lemba ancestry, right? And as we saw, even in that very lecture, in that very video, Parfitt actually affirmed the case for Jewish ancestry for the Lemba. So, in short, Parfitt said almost the exact opposite of what the twins misled this woman into thinking he might have said. And that's honestly, part of what motivated me to make this video. It's what made me think making this video would be worthwhile. And perhaps the lesson here is that if you're a subscriber to Teo Ministries, don't just trust their interpretations, right? Double check their arguments and examine the sources they appeal to for yourself, right? And that said, before I close this video, I wanted to briefly comment on something which appeared at the end of the twins community post. You see, they wrote the following, quote, "How about we have a United Nations sponsored event where we present our sources and they present their sources? Let's deal with DNA, Assyrian relief images, and historical references in geography. Who are the blood descendants of Jacob should be the title," end quote. Okay, first of all, this seems like mere public theater, right? It seems to me like a mere bluff for the faithful supporters who are permitted inside their heavily censored bubble, right? The twins they know very well that there are multiple folks who are willing to discuss DNA with them, but the twins avoid those discussions like the plague, right? They block people on Facebook and they censor the comment sections of their videos. Now, as for the UN sponsoring a debate, I mean, with all due respect, that's hard. It's honestly hard to resist the urge to reach for a word which describes that in less than polite terms, right? I mean, honestly, what makes the Teo twins think that the UN would sponsor such a debate, right? My guess is that they heard something about some statement somebody made at a likely unofficial meeting in some conference room in a UN building, and then they imbued that with more significance than is actually warranted. You see, the reality is that from New York to Geneva, from Vienna to Nairobi, there are all sorts of gatherings happening at different UN offices with countless meetings and innumerable participants expressing a spectrum of ideological positions. And, that's been going on for decades. But just because someone within that swirl of ideas echoed a particular pet interest that you have, that doesn't mean it has quite the gravitas that you think it does, right? But on that note, I'll close this short video here. I hope to have some videos of a bit more substance in the very near future, but for now, I just wanted to correct the record on what the Teo twins said about Tudor Parfitt. And as always, I look forward to any comments, questions, or criticisms. And as always, God bless.